Hello and welcome to the Happy Pear podcast, where we explore ideas and really concepts of how to live a better, more fulfilled life. And I guess that's the core of it. I'm Dave.
And I'm Steve.
And I'm Sarah.
And we're delighted to have you. We've been, for the last 20 years, we've been really living it and trying to explore all aspects of health and fulfillment and happiness. And really, this is a place where we have conversations with people to try to further explore these ideas.
People who explore different diverse things themselves.
And explore is a very relevant word today.
It is indeed. But before we get there, David
Sarah, how's your week? What happened this week for you? I know you've got something exciting to share.
I've got something exciting to share. Well, two things. Stephen, you commented on one of them.
Sarah went running.
I did.
So Sarah's recently just had a little baby, Ralph. He is now
4 months.
Correct, 4 months old. He's now 4 months old. And Sarah went for a run.
I did.
Kilometers.
3 kilometer run, which is my second run. The first one was for 1 kilometer, which I pissed myself. So anyone who's had a baby,
like pissed yourself with fun or actually urinated on yourself?
Definitely not fun. Literally just pissed myself running.
Oh wow!
I know.
Oh,
I know.
Often they're the parts of like having a baby that aren't
People,
just
They're
they're
talking
brushed
about-
under the
you did
carpet.
lots of those. What do you call those?
Kegel muscle
Kegel
exercise. I
things.
know, but I think it's always even a psychological thing that people talk about it so much, and you haven't done that motion in so long. And it's a compounding motion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That it just the thought came into my mind. And then suddenly I pissed myself. And well, you just got to keep running, don't you?
Yeah,
But
of course.
it was, I went for a 3 kilometer run and I didn't. But it's funny how, like you said, it's the things that people don't talk about too much. And then once I mentioned to anyone, they're like, oh yeah, don't be going on a trampoline. Don't be doing any
Trampoline's the one that you hear time and time again. I'm never on a trampoline again.
Don't be doing any jumping
again.
jacks or anything. And you're like, Jesus, that's so limiting. Not that I'm jumping on trampolines all the time, but
No, you don't like to limit yourself.
no.
Wow.
But the other thing that I want to
here
mention,
we are, the main event.
I've had
News
a big
with Sarah Fawcett.
the news of Sarah Fawcett. I've had a big week. I won the lotto.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Are we all going to the Caribbean and to the Bahamas?
We are with my 500 quid that I won.
€500. Woohoo!
I know, but it's funny because if you win the actual Euro Millions or anything like that, if you announce it to people, I think you have to give. I don't remember the percentage. I think it's like half of it you have to give back, and they keep it or whatever. But if you decide to, that's if you don't announce it. If you decide to keep it to yourself and not tell people that you won, whereas the other way around, you got to keep it all. So would you announce or would you not announce?
If I won the lotto,
I'd hate to win it. I'd never do it. And something that, whatever way, there's this like little stoic thing inside me is like, I don't want to win that. I don't want to ever do it. No, I don't want a lotto ticket. You can have it for me. I don't want it. I don't want to win.
Yeah.
And it's like I remember watching a TV show years ago where they tracked people who'd won the lotto before and after and got their stories, and they typically don't end up any happier after winning the lotto.
Yeah.
You know, quite the contrary. You typically, you know, that was according to this show, which I remember watching about 10 years
That's
ago.
why I think I'd be deadly at winning the lotto purely for that reason. I just think I know exactly what to do with it.
What would you do with it?
Well, I'd straight away just give it to people. I'd be class at
You're
winning
great
it
at
because
sharing
I
stuff,
wouldn't.
so.
I just share it straight away.
But then I would challenge that, because we all have ideas of how we would be. A bit like being a parent. You have loads of ideas of how you would be when you were going to be a parent. That's so easy, being a parent. Oh my God, wait till I'm a parent and I'm going to show all these chumps how to do it. Screens, I'm never to give my kid a screen or whatever it might be. And then you're a parent and you're like, oh my God, it's really hard. So I wonder, when you win the lotto, like the idea of winning the lotto versus actually winning it, and you've got all these people coming at you going, can I borrow 100 grand? Can I borrow 20 grand? My car broke.
Great business idea.
I'm your second lost cousin, and so I think there's the challenge, and then charities, and just I imagine it can't be easy.
yeah, but if you get rid of it, like, okay, for example, what did I do with the 500 quid I won? Gave half of it to my uncle Rory, who bought me the ticket, who's been buying me these tickets for every Christmas for the last 30
So he
years.
gave his money back.
So, well, not fully, because I think I worked it out that he spent about 750 quid on lotto tickets on me.
Wow.
Yeah, if I was to add it all up. So he got 250 of it back. But you know, I was like thinking that's what I just do straight away. Just get rid of it straight away, so that there is no can I have instead of. But I suppose if you're giving a charity, I think the Euro Millions, they give a lot of it to charity anyway.
Yeah.
But say hypothetically you won.
Okay.
All right. And now you have to spend a proportion on yourself. Like you have to invest in yourself.
I
wouldn't invest in myself.
I find it
No, but you
hard.
have no choice.
I find it really hard to.
Or, wait.
Oh, I'd
Can I-
building materials for the house. Like I'd want to build a shelter. Like that'd be really fun.
I
Yeah.
find it hard to buy things myself. Like even at the weekend, I was to buy a new vest, and I had to weigh about it, and then I chickened out about it, and then I said I'm going to come back to the afternoon, and I didn't do it, and then I said I was going to do it today, and I still haven't done it. Like, I find it so hard to buy things for myself.
I'm quite similar. Harold gets really irritated on me because I look at like a billion reviews and then I panic and then I don't buy anything.
Oh, I'm the same.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even look at the reviews. I just panic and
There's too many options.
Yeah. The holes aren't that big in this vest.
No.
I've been wanting to buy a jacket for the last, I think, 5 winters, and it's great because by the time you get to January, gosh, your winter's nearly over. So I've nearly done it. I'm sure I'm grand. Like, so I'm going to pick up an old jacket at some point. Like, and now I wear 2 jackets, and then when a really cold day, I wear 3. 3 of them.
Well,
That's my strategy.
Say layering up is the best anyway.
Yeah.
But okay, say if like that, now we're being materialistic there. Say the money that you spend on yourself doesn't have to be a material thing. It can be something beyond that. Something like
a spaceship or something. Like you could
buy
buy
a
that's
cave to go
material.
meditate in.
I
bought a cave.
An experience, an adventure, and something that like
Yeah, I don't know. I think
part
I'm
of me
more.
is
I'm
really
more
old school. That it's like you appreciate things more when you've earned them.
and maybe that articulate, and that's why I like that. And it happens to be Gandhi, a wise man with his old principles, a beacon of wisdom. And he said that one of the blunders of modern life is earning money or receiving money which you didn't earn because you don't have the appreciation for it, and you don't know the challenge that went in to earn this amount of money. And I do intrinsically believe that because I don't know. I think I'm naturally frugal and tight, and I have great appreciation for money. Not that I want to hoard it, but I'm not flippant with it either.
Oh, I completely agree that you can see that across the board of like people who have just been given money versus those who've really earned it. But in my hypothetical scenario, like you could put that money to, if you wanted to do a great adventure, that's a challenging in itself.
Maybe what I'd do, I'd buy a shelter for the cove where we swim it every day, so that there's cover for everyone when we swim. I'd buy things like that. I'd invest in
get
things
more
around
joy.
Greystones.
I'd be farming, and I'd be growing more vegetables or trying to help people, or like I don't know. I'd be spending it for fun, like really, rather than personal gain, because I have somewhere to live. And we've got a farm. Like I've got work till the day I die, so I'm kind of fortunate in that one. So.
Well, that's good. Okay, well, let's make sure you
kind
don't
of boring
win the
answer.
lotto.
Sorry, Sarah.
No, it's answering itself. But one thing I just want to mention on the farm case, I suppose now that awful storm caused.
Yeah, so back
polytunnels.
this week we had 100-kilometre winds, and we've just literally started the farm. It's about 6 months old, maybe 7 months old.
9 months old.
9 months old, there you are. Sure, don't let the truth get in the way of 9 months old, and 2 tunnels unfortunately got absolutely mangled. Like
kind of like a
destroyed, and it was interesting. Dara said to me, "It's like, that's okay, we'll get through it." And then when you go up and you see it, you're like, I actually felt like crying, and just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So we're at the stage where we're going to see what the insurance will cover,
or else
we'll see if
we're out of cash. So we've
no cash. So we'll see if there's lots of people who give us a $5.
Well, if I win the millions again, the Euro millions, I'll put it towards farm then.
Okay, deal. Great. Thanks, you heard it, ladies and gentlemen.
Anyway, this week's guest.
Okay, so thank you for listening to that. But this week's guest is a really, really incredible gentleman, I would say, an absolute gentleman. Damian Browne, an ex-professional rugby player with a 15-year career where he won the Heineken Cup, which is one of the most esteemed kind of rugby achievements, really. And he's been an explorer now the last 6 or 7 years, which sounds like, when I say explorer, you might go Indiana Jones, or what's an explorer?
Not far from it, but an adventure too.
Yeah, he really has, he's had a couple of attempts at Mount Everest and really didn't quite get to them due to circumstances rather than his own personal situation. He's had 2 rows across the Atlantic, both solo rows across the Atlantic. He's done the marathon, the Sable, which is the toughest road race, the toughest race on planet Earth, which is a 6-day marathon, 6 marathons, 256 kilometers at 45 degrees heat where you carry your own. Anyway, he's an incredible man, 42 years old, and really we just discuss about the challenges of what's a 3,000 mile row by yourself across the Atlantic.
We really kind of dug into the row and the mental capacity to deal with, and the reality of on this little 6-meter boat for 133 days. And
113.
some days you get blown backwards after 11 hours work.
But let's not give too much of the podcast away.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, without further ado, we give you the wonderful Damian Browne. Enjoy this. It is a beautiful story of resilience and what we are all capable of.
And what a gentleman.
So back about 12 years ago, we started doing courses, and it was really just trying to teach people how to cook. And consistently people said, lads, could you come up with some course to help me to lose weight? So we did. We partnered.
To lose weight and gain health.
Yeah, it really was, because you can lose weight on amphetamines or,
cocaine if you want to.
Yeah, or all sorts of things, but it's not necessarily healthy. So we came up with a course with a doctor, Dr. Sue Keneally. She's a doctor that specialises in weight loss, and a dietitian. And it's a 4-week course to hold your hand, where there's no calorie counting, no portion control. And it really is about helping you to form the habits. It's starting on Monday, the 26th of January.
How do I learn more, and how do I sign up?
Learn more. Go to the happypear.ie, and you'll find there's a banner on the top there. We're doing it for €79. So if you're interested, please do check it out. Well, welcome the wonderful Damian Browne. It's a real pleasure to have you. It really is.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have like an Indiana Jones meets James Bond meets, I don't know what else. What other analogy I can put on to you?
Something from the west of Ireland, right?
Something from the west of Ireland. I love it.
Has to be something in there. It's definitely in the mix anyway.
And although Damian looks small in that seat, he is a giant of a man. A big hunk, as we would say. Yeah.
When I was coming up in the car here, I was saying to Steve, I wonder what you think of your man, the guy who did the 14 Peaks.
Oh, Nims.
Nims, yeah. What's your...
Do you know, I struggled to... I was following him for quite a while. And then I got a bit tired of the kind of, I don't know, the cliched kind of self-promotion. I just found, I don't know, I really enjoy people who are genuine and authentic. I kind of connect with that. And when I don't feel that off somebody, I kind of just... step away. We have a choice what we let into our lives, right? What sort of... not to discredit what he's done is incredible, but I just, if you get that sense of somebody, I'm just somebody who'll kind of move on, and cut it out of my life. So that's actually what happened there. Probably not the answer you were expecting. No,
but it doesn't.
I'm just genuinely curious.
But I was curious, from both angles, because obviously his physical pursuits, you would have a greater understanding of them than we would. You haven't climbed and prepped for climbing Everest and done all sorts of things.
Did you climb Everest?
Yeah, I didn't climb it. No, I attempted it summer of 21, and it was the summer of
wasn't it?
Delta variant, and there was queues, and it was actually rubbed shoulders with him while he was there, because he guides obviously on Everest, and we were going through the Khumbu at one point, and he was coming up the icefall, but COVID ended up shutting down my expedition, so I got COVID while I was there, and was evacuated back to Kathmandu and spent 10 days in a hotel room isolating. Wow. And then went back up to the mountain and struggled through about 3 weeks of just trying to, the remnants of the illness, and also reacclimatizing. And then I felt like I was regathering some kind of confidence and strength. Like I was like, I could have a shot at this, after getting COVID, pretty amazing. And then literally the night we were leaving to go on the start of our summit rotation, the head of the operator who was under called a meeting and saying, oh, listen, all our Sherpa have just tested positive for COVID at Camp 2 and Camp 4. So we're taking them all off the mountain to retest them, and then every one of them had COVID, so they shut down the expedition. So after 8 weeks on the mountain, I had to go home.
How do you, because we all have little failures in our day, and I use that word failure lightly because failure is just a step. It's just a step in the direction that we're going. How do you deal with that? Because obviously you put it out there, I'm going climbing Everest. There's massive funding, there's massive family commitments, there's so much time, there's so much energy goes into it. And I can't imagine what it's like to have to walk away and swallow that pill and face those cameras that you don't want to face.
Yeah, I put so much into and as you mentioned as well, the sacrifice from family, but I'd put so much into it. The training period in particular is so arduous and takes a lot of emotional energy, and then I got there, and then to fight through firstly altitude sickness and then COVID, and to kind of stay in the game. By the time it got to the making the decision, and the obvious decision that had to be made to close down the expedition, I just felt like I had no emotion left to give to it. I was almost numb. I was like,
whatever, I'm done at this stage.
Done. Just get me home now. Like, you know, and then subsequently, you know, I started to, like, once I got back home eventually, like, so I had to, firstly, all the airports were closed in Nepal, so they weren't letting anyone out. There was a couple of expatriation flights that I eventually got on through. When you love this, right? So I had to go from Kathmandu to Brisbane, but I went Kathmandu to Seoul to LA, so across the Pacific.
Oh my God.
LA back to Brisbane, across the Pacific again. So 52 hours of travel. It cost me about $5,000, and then I had to go into a hotel for 2 weeks because it was the time Australia were doing the 2-week quarantine to let everyone in.
So just in case you didn't have enough time to deal with all the...
Just to get home, like, so I had to go through all that. Like, you could probably say that the 2 weeks in a hotel probably helped process it, but there was definitely... just great disappointment, you know, and a little bit of anger about the whole thing. And, you know, what I do find is when it's, so two things. Firstly, when it's out of your control, I can process that really well and quickly. And secondly, when I live my values, you know, when I embody things that are important to me and live up to my standards, if it all goes pear-shaped, well, that's fine. You know, as long as I action and live the way I at the kind of true to things that are important to me and to the level that I demand of myself, well, then I can again process these things pretty well. And I felt I did that on Everest. Like, I fought to stay in the game through sickness and through big emotional challenge as well. You know, I speaking of sacrifice, I left Brisbane to go to Everest 5 days after my daughter was born.
Oh my wow.
Yeah. Because that might sound incredibly selfish, and to a level it is, but there was also immense pressure financially to go and take on the climb, you know, firstly from sponsors and secondly from my own behalf, you know, through COVID and all that. Things had not gone well for me, so I saw this as an opportunity to make something happen, you know. And so yeah. And my daughter was meant to be born March 21st, and I was meant to go to Everest on the 3rd of April to fly, and she arrived on the 4th of April. She was like 12 days late. So wow. You can imagine now. And we said we'd make the call, me and my partner Roselle, after she came, you know, and everything hopefully had gone well with the birth. And, you know, thankfully it did. But, you know, I was kind of going... I didn't even know up until maybe 3 days before that I was actually going to go to Everest, you know. So it was incredibly complicated, and I felt a bit unfair that I was in between this rock and a hard place in a little bit, and then having to ask that sacrifice of them was a lot to ask, you know. So then coming back unsuccessful.
You felt beaten, and then you had to kind of.
And do you like obviously the process? You know, we live in a world nowadays where it's very much about the product rather than the process. It's about the end result rather than the journey to get there. And one thing I massively admire in you, I feel like you've got old values, like old school values, gentlemanly values, Marcus Aurelius type values. I'm using words here to describe something, but that it's about the process. And if you show up and do the process, well, the end result is out of your control. And I just wonder, like when you came back in that time, and like a lot of people that would break someone, you know, when you're coming back and you've put all the financial, all the energy, and there's so much hardship, like, do you feel, is that kind of, you know, you can fall into that victim mentality, that poor me, oh my God. And how do you turn that around? And how did you turn that around and kind of catapult you into this one-man rowing expedition across the Atlantic?
Well, even then, though, I knew that was coming. You know, I'd been already working on that in the background.
Up in Everest on the rowing machine, like.
Well, dragging a concept too behind me, climbing through the ice fall. But you know, these things take a long time to make happen. So even though Everest was like front and center in the visor, I knew once I came back from Everest, it was kind of the last year of pushing into the row. So that helps kind of. Redirect yourself, you know. You don't have
a sense of purpose almost.
Yeah, exactly.
To focus on.
Yeah, because you don't have a lot of time. Like, that might sound like a lot of time. So that was July, and so it was like 11 months. But in terms of training your body for something and preparing yourself physically and mentally for rowing an ocean, that's actually not that much time, you know. So you got to kind of get about it and get to work pretty soon, because that'll fast approach. And if there's there's many things you can change during an expedition. You know, you can fix, like if, for example, if something breaks, you can fix it, or you can get on the phone to somebody who has the knowledge how to fix it. And basically, as Denzel Washington says in Philadelphia, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old here, like tell me how to do this. But there's one thing you can't prepare and fix, it's your body and your mind while you're out there. So you got to put in the time well before that to have it to a level and have it to capacities that you know are going to serve you in succeeding in what you want to succeed in. So after Everest, okay, there was a kind of bit of convalescing and a little bit of rebooting emotionally, but it wasn't as long as, you know, you'd probably want it to be, because I had to get to work and get training for the North Atlantic.
How do you balance it? Like, not male and female, but masculine and feminine energy. So like a lot of exploring, and like, say you played rugby, you know, professional rugby for many years. It was like 10 or 12.
19. It was about
15, 16
15, 16 years.
Yeah.
So like serious high professional, very masculine environment,
Yeah, for sure.
dominating the team and trying to score tries. And then you go over to kind of like taking on, you know, serious feats of physical endurance, mental aptitude, like massive tolerance, which they're quite masculine in their pursuit. How do you balance that out to express a feminine side in you? Or do you? Or is it just, this is just the archetype or the way you experience life?
Yeah, like there's no conscious deliberation around that. I think if I was to reflect, like, and that does come out in me, and where does it come out? Like I feel deeply, you know, and I'd like to think I'm quite emotionally connected with those feelings. You know, I've always had an internal outlook, if that makes sense. So I've always been kind of had an attention on what's happening inside. So, and that's true physical pursuits, right? So connecting, making that mind muscle connection. But I suppose how that's evolved is into the more emotional side of it, and connecting with what I'm feeling emotionally, and recognizing that, and trying to, endeavoring at least to the best of my ability to express that. So that is where that comes out.
So now when you write, like when I read your writing on various different Instagram posts, like you're very articulate and you get into the detail. It's not like it was a tough day today, full stop. It's like there's like 1,000 characters are there, and there's a story, and it's
I'm
deep,
interested in that internal story, you know, and like trying to, you know, like it's a great way. It's how we humans can connect through emotion, you know. So you can bring somebody into the what you were going through in that moment, so they might nearly kind of live the journey a little bit with you, you know. And I think I try my best to describe everything I was going through, and actually the circumstances to tell that story to the best of my ability, I suppose.
Well, I think the one thing that, like, say particularly on your Atlantic crossing, there's no room for filters. Like, you're one man out there and you are on survival mode. Like, so you can't keep the Instagram filter of everything is awesome. Like, it has to, you're at such, you're so far out the end of the plank that you can't but be unbelievably authentic and unbelievably real, which is what most of us are craving for. That's where most of us, I think, where the true connection in life comes, is when we're broken open, that then you can connect and go, I know that pain. I can feel that pain. I can empathize with you. And I think it's a beautiful gift to be, you know, like, and I think you're a great advocate of this, of pain, like hardship, and whether it's even sought after hardship or life kind of gives you hardship, through those periods of growth, there's incredible, through this period, those challenging periods, there's incredible growth, and there's incredible capacity for connection with others through them.
The discomfort and the hardship, like, just strips away all those layers of protection that we have to have, you know, to kind of survive in life. We unfortunately can't. We don't live in a world where we can kind of be vulnerable and exposed all the time, right? So over the course of our lives, we build up layers and layers and layers to help us protect our kind of inner child. And what something like that does is it just strips it all away. And for want of a better expression, you don't give a fuck. Do you know? And you let it all out, like, because you're faced with this, like, beautiful reality nearly, you know, that kind of helps you kind of expose yourself that little bit more, and shows you the beauty of living that way, and then once you've kind of done that, once you've kind of taken that step to, you know, expose yourself, you feel, at least I have anyway, this is what I've experienced, is you get this beautiful rush of positive feeling that is almost like, geez, I want more of that. You know, that feels right, for want of a better expression.
Kind of the honesty, you're in flow, or you're
yeah.
very,
yeah,
connected.
It's just this like space where it's like, yeah, you're so connected with your kind of authentic self, and so far from being kind of corrupted by I don't want to say by life, but by
the tinsel of
pursuit.
life.
yeah,
The sweet shop of life.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot to allure us and attract us away from our values, or our, you know, our foundation, if you will. You know, there's a lot of...
I remember growing up hearing of a girl who was, maybe she was like early college, she went and she sailed around the world on a solo sailing boat, and I've always really admired it, and part of me craved it, that sense of an adventure, and you're on your own, and you have to sit with your demons, and you have to find the capacity to go when you're empty. And that's the bit that really fascinates me with in particular your most recent rowing across the North Atlantic. Like, it was from New York to Galway, wasn't it? Which is like phenomenal. Like, how do you deal with those moments when you're absolutely, like, you are empty, you want to give up, and you almost surrender to the death of life? You're like how do you, because I know myself on various trips, there were times when I'm sleeping up rough, and there's a storm and you're on your own, and you reach a point where it's like, listen, if I die, I die. Like, you know, you kind of reach that point, and I imagine on an ocean cross like that, it's even way more compounded.
Well, like countless moments of despair. I just got like incredibly unlucky with the conditions, and so the distance from New York to Galway is about 2,650, 2,700 nautical miles, and I ended up rowing 3,450 because I went backwards about between 400 and 500 nautical miles over the course of the whole thing.
And that's just, you get flipped around, you don't look at the compass, and you're...
Well, it's just, yeah, or count that there's adverse currents, so currents going back the opposite way, and you just don't have the power to row against them, or if you do, you know, it'll bring you north. You know, you can't get any sort of headway, you can't get any progress against it, and then headwinds. So
is there someone you can call and go, listen, you know, the way, like, life, we're so used to having, I'll take out my phone, I'll check Google Maps, like, you can't do that. Like, where do you turn to? Is it just like...
I mean, there's beauty in not having any choice, like,
course,
because,
yeah.
right, you know, it strips away all that fluff, yeah, and then, you know...
or the illusion of control. It loses that, where suddenly it's like, okay.
And it's total self-reliance, like, you know, and that's knowing that that is within your capacities, you know, is really, like, and of course that comes back to the training, like that, you know, you're ready, you have to be ready for moments like that, you know, where there's nobody's coming to help you, like, you know, so you got to be able to deal with it. And so physically, I'd like to think that no matter what happens, I have the capacities here to deal with whatever comes at me, you know, and I clearly have to be trained to a high level, and mentally as well, you know. So in those moments of despair, self-awareness is your number one human attribute that you can use, because you have to be aware of that internal narrative,
like,
right?
I'm angry, I'm upset,
Yeah,
I'm like a lunatic right now.
And it's just very destructive, or maybe you're telling yourself some story, and then, you know, that can be going on, like, there's always conversation going on in our heads, and most of the time we're unaware of it, you know. So it's just, you know, having that capacity to recognize that, because if you're not aware, you can't change it. And then how do you change your state then? Well, what I found is that using the powers of concentration, so concentrating on something that's within your control in a physical prism or physical endeavor at least, you're able to kind of redirect your mind to a much more neutral place. So you're able to get away from that negative, whatever, overwhelming, stressed, anxious, in this case, moments of despair. And then, you know, get to a place of control firstly and neutrality. Like if imagine I'm just constantly thinking about Galway and how long, how far, and this is not far from the case. Like you are often, your mind just is kind of wired to think about the outcome, right? But that doesn't serve me in any way. Like I have no control over the outcome. I just have control of this present moment and what I'm doing right now and the actions that can get me there. Yeah, I have control of that. So if I concentrate on those, it just helps my mental state by kind of neutralizing it. So that's the process I often went through just to control my mind. There was one particular phase. So milestones are a big thing out there, you know, and I got to kind of one of my last big milestones, 500 nautical miles to go to Galway. And by the time I got to 400 nautical miles to go to Galway, it was 13 days later.
Oh,
That
and like how long does it take? Like how many miles can you row a day? Like
that should take about 2.5 days on normal conditions, not even good conditions. That should take 100 miles. Should take 40 miles a day roughly, so 2.5 days. It took me 13 days. That's rowing 11 hours a day, every day. One day minus 7 miles, another day 2 miles for 11 hours work, another day 4 miles, another day 7 miles. So like that I honestly felt I was in rowing purgatory, and I was damned for the rest of my life to be in that part of the ocean. Like I just couldn't get any progress, and the way I dealt with it,
you're into the wind, you're uphill the whole way.
Constantly winds, headwinds, and a little bit of current as well, and I just can't, you know. Yeah, basically the steepest hill you can imagine, just kind of trying to run up that constantly, and I was just treading, you know, I was just getting nowhere. So yeah, dealing with that was just all about, you know, controlling the moment. So what's within my control in this very moment, and then concentrating on that. So there's 4 things as far as I can make out, at least in terms of physical endeavor, that's always within your control. So your body position and technique of what you're doing. So bringing your attention to that, maybe a specific part of the chain within, you know, part of the body part, making that mind muscle connection. It just kind of, you know, firstly brings you to the present moment and neutralizes your state, so you can continue to perform without the effects of the negative, overwhelming emotion, right, or mental state. Your breath, your effort, all of those, when concentrated on a specific action or a specific part of the action, you know, a specific part of your respiratory workings, or, you know, a specific body part, and linking in and connecting with how much force you're generating through that, you know, so your effort, what they do is they take you out of that negative mental state into a neutralized
kind of misery, gives you something
So
to
it's
focus
really like just, it's the ultimate back to the presence. Like, well, I've got this
meditation in essence.
But it's the ultimate meditation, because in a sense you've got nothing but monotony. You've got 3 months out there by yourself with probably just waves and wind and different degrees of mist and vision.
What would you eat?
all dehydrated rations. So
the joy, the excitement.
Waiting here, and I lost my the ability to boil water on day 24, so I had to. That was all eaten cold for 88 days.
How big is a boat? Sorry to be
so. It's 6 meters, 6.2 meters. So
it's a bit the size of this room.
Yeah, not much longer than this. And then
do you have a little cabin that you can?
One big cabin, yeah, where all your electrics are and your bed, and you know that's your kind of refuge.
And does water get in there? Like, does your bed get wet?
Well, it gets wet.
Capsized.
Yeah, when you capsize, but also there's no airflow through there, so over time. You get a lot of condensation. So between dragging in water, which you just can't help, some water getting in, and then condensation, by the end, it's a pretty wet space, and you have to just sleep in the wet, basically wet sleeping bag, or
Jeez, you're really selling it to say.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, it's
cold.
lovely.
Like it's not like
Later, yeah. So the last kind of, when I was getting north towards Ireland, and it was kind of end of September, October time. It was quite cold and wet in there, and early in the piece, leaving New York, it was summer, like so long it took, but it was roasting that first kind of 6 weeks, you know.
for 6 weeks.
In those days in the cabin, when you have to have the two hatches shut for obviously protection for the electrics from the waves and all that, so you can't let any water in. So when you go to sleep in the cabin in those days, it's like 40 degrees, like, so it's like this little pod, this sauna, you know, that just all
talk about the extremes.
Yeah.
Just damp, wet, freezing.
yeah, and by the end then it's
is water for fresh water, is there some kind of like salt
Desalinator,
water?
is that what you mean?
desalinator.
Is that what you use?
Yeah, desalinator.
That's where you get your water. You just desalinate.
Yeah, that's the most important piece of equipment on the boat, as you can imagine, right? So we had a unit that gave about 6 litres so a litre and a half every 15 minutes, so 6 litres in an hour. And you put that on. Normally, you try and put it on when the sun is most on the solar panels on the boat, and to keep a less stress off the systems. There's a big draw on power when you're desalinating the water. The issue on this route in particular is there's not that much sun because it's a lot of cloud cover, and obviously later, September, October, North Atlantic, much more. So by the time I got to Galway, actually, I was down to 20% battery power. And that's a huge threat, right? Because once those batteries get below 50%, they can actually just discharge out of nowhere. Like they can just, you know, and if you don't have any power, you can't make water, you can't navigate really, you know, not particularly efficiently anyway. It means kind of game over. Like, so
Your ability to communicate is gone.
Ability to communicate is gone, yeah. So you got it. Like there is some battery powered stuff, but you know, obviously you can't charge those batteries either after some time. So that's power management is a huge part of the whole thing, you know, making sure that you're only using the water maker, particularly when it's the sun is out and at its highest and the most hitting the most.
And you'd sleep 4 hours row, 4 hours sleep 4. Was that the cycle, or what was your kind of did you have a cycle, or was it just you got up and you rode and then you went to bed, got up, rode, or was it?
I kind of had a cycle. So when Gussie was on the boat, it was 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And then when he left, you know, it's a bit of a luxury.
So even just to clarify this, because people wouldn't know, you didn't start it as a solo mission. You started it with a friend, Gus Fergus, and you were both going to do it together. And then day 13, he had... You know, Gus has a backstory that's kind of relevant as well.
Yeah, he has an amazing backstory. So, yeah, he was medically evacuated on day 13. And the reason why we have to go way back, like maybe 4 years now, when he had a workplace accident and he was paralysed, given 5% chance to ever recover any sensation below his belly button. So, and they said to him in the spinal unit, in the matter where he had his emergency surgery, that... You know, for that very slim prognosis of ever recovering 5% sensation below your belly button, if for that to happen, you probably have to start to feel something within 72 hours. And 6 weeks later, he was in a ward in University Hospital Galway, and he still hadn't felt anything. So, you know, speaking of despair, can you imagine what he went through in that time? But believe it or not, he said he was one night very late, he was just looking at his big toe, trying to wiggle it, and he felt something, and he called the nurse and he said, "Is my toe moving?" And she said, "I think so, yeah." And the next day, the surgeon or whoever was doing the rounds in University Hospital Galway came in and he showed him the big toe moving, and he said, "That's most unexpected." And he went on this
euphoria.
Imagine he went on this massive journey. Then
and it sounds like the smallest thing, but yet for him it's the biggest
movement he'll ever have in his life. Like into the National Rehab Hospital here in Dún Laoghaire, and on the flat of his back, and walked out 16 weeks later. Now very shaky, as you can imagine, but that was his goal, to walk out. And then a year after his accident, he walked across the country from where it happened in Athenry, all the way to Dún Laoghaire, back to the National Rehab Hospital to raise money for them. So, you know, an incredible journey in itself. And it was during that walk, actually, we've been friends since we were like 17, but my brother was meant to do this with me originally, and he'd pulled out at that stage. So there was like a question in my mind, who am I going to do this with? And I saw his, not only through that journey to get to there, but also walking across the country. Actually, I did a few days with him, and it was pretty demanding, you know. And this is a guy who couldn't walk. I mean, was, you know, a year before that looked like he'd never walk again, and here he was walking across. So I just saw things in him that I thought, you know, that he could be the guy. So I asked him, and he took up the space. And we went, you know, we worked very hard on the project for a couple of years. But that it was, you know, that day 13 was just an accumulation of, firstly, that journey and the compromises he's had on his health, you know, and the demands of an ocean row, and it was just too much for him. And he, his O2 sats, he was measuring them, so he was exhausted. Like the first week, he had a serious level of exhaustion, but, you know, I was putting that down to just it's a very strange experience for your body to be habituated to living on solid ground, and, you know, a place where humans are meant to live, and then going into this environment where they're not meant to live on a little boat, you know. And he was getting very little rest because the heat in the cabin, you know. So, you know, even though he's exhausted, he's crawling into this cabin that's like 40 degrees, right? And there's no airflow, so it's very hard to breathe in there as well after a while. Once you get through the amount of air that's in there, it gets real shallow, so you get real chesty, and it was creating panic, you know, like for him, and he'd have to come out and get. So he was stressing about that, and obviously he's also rowing 12 hours a day as well, and it just caught up with him, and he measured his O2 sats because the day after he had his surgery in the spinal unit in the Mater private, he got rushed into ICU when his O2 saturation levels dropped below 90, and apparently that's an indicator for blood clotting. So he just made this association back to that moment, and we had a number of little units on board that we could, you know, manage our health with, and that was one of them. And he just grabbed that out of the medical bag and tested it, and it was at 86. So I was like, oh. And then he told me the story about the blood clotting and getting put in ICU post the surgery. And once he said that to me, I was like, it's game over here for you. I didn't say it out loud. I just knew.
And
like,
in your head, you're like, right, you're ready to take this on your own.
Yeah. While also like trying to process, like, for him, you know, and the disappointment for him, and then we, you know, how do we get you off this boat? Like, we need to get you off this boat immediately and get you on supplemental oxygen and make sure you're safe, right? Because, you know, we didn't know what could happen. Thankfully, nothing did happen. But so there was a whole kind of emergency evacuation procedure which accumulated in this big 256 meter Singaporean cargo ship, and us rowing up to it. It'd been directed by the US Coast Guard to come and aid in getting Gussie off the boat, and us rowing up to this thing. Thankfully, it was calm day. It was still incredibly tense. Like, you're in this tiny little 6 meter ocean rowing boat and this massive tanker, and then them dropping a kind of gangplank and us trying to get Gussie on, and eventually we got him on. And like, I felt like a sitting duck underneath that thing, you know. It's, even though it was calm, it was still bobbing up and down, and they're dropping this gangplank, and at one point we kind of drifted under it and came up underneath it, and it cracked one of these poles that we had for storing oars, you know. So, and that was a calm day. I can't imagine doing that on a day outside of that, but we eventually got him off and he was evacuated, and then I had to face into.
So you've got all this huff and puff and all this. You're focused on Gus and how to get him off, and then everything happens, and then it's just Damian by himself on a boat with about 2,500 miles,
exactly,
and
that.
3 months of rowing ahead of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, at that point, I wasn't sure. Like, where my mind shot to in terms of time frame, I was thinking we were hoping as a pair to go for the world record, which was 55 days. We weren't that far off it at that point. We were a little bit behind it, but you never know what could have happened after that. So when he was gone, I was thinking, it was an incredibly daunting prospect to think about what was coming. Because
did you even think to kind of throw in the towel for solo? No,
never. Like, it was very important to me, you know. This project was what I would deem a legacy project for me. Like, you know, the imagery around that, and the imagery from the kind of start, the genesis of the project was always about rowing into Galway and the impact that could have on people. You know, I think there's something very, like, words are great, of course, and we can communicate very powerfully through words, but there's something different about actions in terms of, you know, when we see somebody, you know, aspiring to do something very difficult.
To Galway from New York.
Yeah. And I just, that imagery, you know, even like, I imagined it nearly through the eyes of children, you know, and what they would think, you know, to witness that. So like it over time, you know, it grew and grew and grew, the importance of it inside me. So like when it came to moments like that, I didn't even think about it. It was just very much a case of, let's crack on here.
On we go.
Yeah. And even back to that you're like your legacy, you know, leaving your legacy, and you've got thinking of young people's eyes, and you're kind of going, well, where did the idea come from? Like, where the hell did the seed come from to row from New York to Galway? Like, where does
it came from? Two different people, nearly, if you want. So this was my second Atlantic crossing. So I went the other direction, from La Gomera to Antigua in 2000.
So that's the kind of glamorous one, or the nice, like,
yeah,
kind of,
bit,
that's the business class version.
Yeah.
You're going through the nice warm waters. That's
right.
Or is it, at least in my head?
Well, I mean, it's obviously, it's an ocean row, so it's challenging. But at the same time, if you're going to do an ocean row, that's the best place to start. Yeah. And they've got the trade winds, see, so they've got this kind of consistent sweep of wind across that, just above the equator all the time. So it's how Columbus would have got across, and all
so
sailors.
It's like an escalator.
Well, I wouldn't quite say
not quite. Sorry.
No, like you have a little bit of help. Like, so, you know, if you go that route, when you fall asleep at night, say as I did as a solo, there's a good chance I'll make a bit of ground. Like, I might make 7 or 8 miles on the North Atlantic. That's not the case.
Do you lose? Like, how do you, like, what happens? Like the simple things like that. Do you, like, the parachute
anchor if the winds are significantly against you, but normally you just leave, because it takes a lot of time to put that out and pull that in, so most of the time you just let the boat is at the mercy of the elements. So there's it came to me,
like, you put an anchor down, or no, because you can't get near the bottom,
nowhere near it. Yeah, no, so you need like 3 miles of
you just
line.
Stop and leave it there.
Yeah, you just stop rowing, and then, you know, you kind of hope and pray that the boat will be taken forward, and the odd time it would, but mostly you go backwards, or you might go north. You'll go some way, but you won't really go towards Galway. I didn't have any luck. It
is like just like the most arduous test.
Yeah.
Like, hearing you speak about it, it's just like,
it's incredibly demoralizing at times, the going backwards thing. But you become now, to a certain extent, you become a little bit desensitized to it, because it happens so much, and you build up a level of acceptance as well. You're like, you know, on whatever day 80, I'm going backwards tonight, you know, and there's not much I can do, and the next day I'll get up and I'll put in the effort again. But, you know, it really, really breaks you down over time. Like, that's something you can deal with for 2 or 3 days, grand, but 60 days of it,
like, what keeps you going? Is it that imagery, or like what? Yeah. Like, what is it? Like,
well, that's a powerful thing, you know. The imagery, yeah, I can definitely leverage, and did definitely leverage that while I was out there. So I had this thing about the bonfires of Arran. It just came to me one day. I was thinking about it, you know, and I remembered, like, is it Lord of the Rings, you know, where they light the bonfires on top of the mountains to signal something's happening. And I know, of course, it's a big thing in the country as well. If there's a GA team wins something, they all light bonfires. So it just came to me. I thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if the people of Arran started lighting bonfires? And then that imagery grew, and then I heard back that they were going to. This was a thing, so that was a real driver to me. And that the other imagery I talked about,
did they like?
They did, yeah. There's a great photo of me kind of coming into the Aran Islands, and one of the bonfires lit in the background, and me kind of saluting them, you know. So
pretty cool.
So that was a big driver, that imagery, you know, and just
because it really is like trying to find a thread of hope that will keep you going at a time of absolute despair, and a thread of hope that you're not gonna let go of.
Yeah,
because it's at those moments of despair that you just.
But there is also that element of, like, you know, when you put it out there and you tell enough people,
there's social accountability.
Well, there's more than social accountability. There's so much
support, inertia.
There's so much that it's harder to. No, I'm not saying it's hard. Like, it's the decision is made that you're going to see this through. Like it's nearly easy that there's no possibility that you're not going to. It's just a matter of how long and gritting through the pain. I think
it plays a part.
A part.
It does play a part. Yeah, I think the biggest piece of that puzzle, and it is a bit of a puzzle, is what's it mean? What's it mean to you? Like, you know, why are you doing it? You know. And for me, it touched a lot of things. So personally, I knew I was going to get a lot from the experience going into those like really difficult places. I'm going to grow. I'm going to have paradigm shifts out there. I'm going to have changes in perspective, right? So I know I'm going to get a lot from it, you know, through that genuine challenge. I'm a big believer in like the powers of somebody who's trying to lift themselves up and trying to realize their potential, you know, and how that affects those people around them, you know, closest to them. So at least through that belief, be it right or wrong, the people closest to me are going to get something from this, you know. So there's a great analogy actually I like to use around that. So imagine putting a tissue on a tabletop and you're in the middle, that person who is striving for more from themselves and trying to get more out of their life and working towards something important to them. And then on the four corners, say you have your partner and then your kids on the other corner and your friends on the other corner and your parents or colleagues, you know, anyway, people very important to you on all four corners. And that person to kind of mimic that mindset and those actions to get more from themselves. So you imagine pinching the middle of the tissue and that person's lifting themselves up. So you lift up the corners, you lift up the middle of the tissue. Well, the four corners come with it. They get raised up as well. I believe that like that's the effect you have on those people closest to you. And then on a broader scale then, I felt that the project itself could make a small little bit of difference in somebody's life by inducing a little bit of energy for them, like showing them a picture and an action of somebody who's trying to get up more from themselves and from life, and hopefully inducing a little bit of energy for that person to demand a little bit more from themselves, aim a little bit higher and hold themselves to higher standards and push on. So it was on those three levels, you know, I felt it was going to give something to myself, to those closest to me, and then to anyone watching on. And I think when you hit those three things with something you're doing, it's very purposeful and meaningful. And then it gets you through those really, really tough times.
Mm-hmm. Like, what are the learnings that you like? Like, cause for me, when I think about a trip like that, it's like a quest. It's like, you know, to use the metaphor, say the Christian metaphor, Jesus going to the desert for 40 days, 40 nights and not eating. And even there was talk of that Pythagoras, remember Pythagoras' theorem that we used to have to learn in school, but that apparently he had an education center, university, I think it was in Egypt or somewhere in the Middle East. And to go there, you had to, it wasn't information or it wasn't enough. You had to experience knowledge. And the only way you experienced knowledge was 40 days, 40 nights fasting, because only then you had to sit with yourself. And, you know, there was a lot of internal work that had to be faced, demons inside yourself you had to slay.
Yeah.
And I wonder for you on that journey like that, like what are the learnings that you take home inside yourself that almost are hard to articulate? And I know it's kind of ironic I'm asking you to articulate, but you know,
What's one of the things that you learned that you can't articulate about? What are they?
Okay, well, listen, I'm trying.
Yeah. I think so. If I think about perspective, like, so you can get really dragged down by all these like the small little elements of whatever you're doing, right? You know, and kind of get pulled into the negative emotions that come up, like the frustrations and the agitations and the overwhelm. One thing that I was able to kind of do on this expedition better than any other time was to kind of see a broader picture in those times, like, so be able to redirect my mind and ask myself some questions around that, like, so
You had 3 questions written on the boat.
Yeah. So that was more around like my actions and how to kind of control the present moment. But this was more around like, I was just, well, you know, it's very easy to feel sorry for myself and be a victim and like, that lazy side of us all, you know, to come out and play a leading role, and to kind of get past that. I was like, well, hang on here, like, so what have you got on the boat? Like, what have you got? So I'm actually safe, like, you know, even though it's only a little 6-meter ocean rowing boat, I can crawl into that cabin and feel and be safe. No matter what comes, even if a hurricane comes, that'll hold you tight. I have food, I have water, I'm loved, you know, I have support at home. So I was able to kind of, what I learned was that I was able to access much healthier and perspectives to kind of get out of that quagmire of the lazy side of the human, you know, the entitled,
poor me.
What's that?
Poor me.
Poor me, woe is me, isn't life terrible? Isn't this so tough? Oh my God, I can't get any luck. So that was one thing. I was and a level of gratitude for the hardship, like, and what that was giving me, you know. I wanted to be there. Like, I put myself in that position. So firstly, you can shut the fuck up complaining about it, right? And what that was going to give me, you know, like these, like I talked about, these shifts in perspective, or at least a faster access to better perspective. So that was another thing that popped up. Like, so I'm actually grateful for this, because it's going to give me like these shifts in my paradigms, that when I get back to everyday life, like which is, if you imagine your life as a kind of almost like a pie chart, right? So, and say you spend 3% of it on an expedition, well, the other 97%, whatever that's made up of, that benefits massively from the hardship of that little 3% of your life that you spend exposing yourself to difficulty, purposeful difficulty. But so that made me like kind of look on it a little bit differently. Those moments of difficulty and despair. And there was one other thing that came up while you were asking that question.
Well, even while you're thinking about it like that, like nowadays we live, certainly in the Western world, the first world, we live lives of the most comfortable of any civilization of humans that have ever lived on the planet. And yet most likely, yeah. Yet there's probably greater degrees of depression and mental health and dissatisfaction and victim mentality and all these types. Like, they're more prevalent probably than previous generations, where they certainly haven't had it as well in terms of materials. And like, I'm thinking more about challenges and obstacles. And nowadays, like, you've got a kind of, it's a manufactured obstacle, but the big, like, just such a massive obstacle of testing your hardship. And I just wondered about, even to open up the conversation about hardship and the importance of adversity, and because it kind of, it shows the depths within ourselves, because most of us are looking, we're looking on social media and Instagram, and we're looking at these lives that everyone's putting out there, the top 2% of their lives, which is, they won this and they got this and they had a great day and they traveled here and they did this, and we're kind of comparing it. Like, subconsciously, it's not, underneath it, we're comparing ourselves to these type of things. Same on TV, same on everything. And we're all like, where do I get meaning and where do I get purpose? And like, part of my own experience with life is through the real challenges and the real hardships is where you realize there's more meaning, because it almost cracks you open to a deeper version of yourself. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about obstacles and challenges and the importance of them and the lessons that come from them.
We're not going to find much in comfort. And it's this strange dichotomy, because I think as a species we are compelled on some level to comfort means survival, right? But we don't actually on the in the opposite way, in the path of a more difficulty or struggle and hardship and toil. That's where the richness in life lies. Anyway, from my experience. So in one way we're compelled, right? We're all moving, like, how do we make something better, faster, quicker? How do we, everything's around solving these problems in terms of our kind of mentality on a kind of global scale. But it's not helping us in any way find more substance in life, more fulfillment, more contentment. And, you know, if you get all those things, you're going to be a pretty happy individual. So I don't know how there was no moment of conscious thought for me around that. I just felt that, you know, I was able to, on some level, communicate through my perception of my internal feelings and emotions that this was the right way for me to live, like by finding a way to self-impose hardship on myself. And that might sound a bit
stoic.
Yeah, like
masochistic,
yeah, but it's not that at all. Like it's more having an association between the action and the rewards. So you know, feeling that, like, so my journey started when I was 17, and I in this kind of way of life, at least. And I didn't make my school's rugby team. I was in 5th year in a school called the Bish in Galway, and rugby was like everything for me at that point. Like, I mean, for the next basically 20 years after that, it was like my be all and end all. So that like, when I didn't feel good about that, like that made me feel disappointed in myself. I knew there was more within me. I was embarrassed, like not playing. I was like, compared to everyone else, I was ginormous. Like, I should have been running the show, and here I was, I hadn't played a minute. So it was embarrassing and almost shameful, you know. So I used those negative emotions to do something positive. So I made a decision. Well, I'm not fit. Like, I was just totally unfit. So I'm going to go and get fit. How do you do that? I don't know. I think you run laps. So I went up to Galwegians, which is just up from my parents' house, and one wet, dank, dirty April night, pissing out the heavens, 11 o'clock at night, I was wearing about 20 layers, and I started running, and I only lasted 2.5 laps, but I was back the next night and the next night and the next night, and every night for 30 nights straight I just trampled kind of laps into that pitch. And like, the rewards of those actions and persevering through, like I wanted to stop every step of every one of those nights, but I was able to push a little bit further, and I could see myself getting fitter and fitter every night. And by the last night, I was running 20 plus laps. So there was rewards there, but internally there was so much rich rewards from, firstly, just taking that responsibility for something within my life that meant something to me, committing to that action of getting fit, and then work. I think that's something that gets overlooked a lot, is the power of work, like doing something that is important to you and putting in the time, and then persevering through the obvious hurdles like are going to come when you're trying to do something for yourself like that. Like, you know, persevering through the difficulty of running laps at 17 when you're nearly 20 stone and totally unfit, and every cell in your body is screaming at you to stop every step of the way, but you keep going, as you know. So that ingrained something in me, and I was able to obviously build a very positive association between doing something hard and the rewards of that. Because, like, so 2 years after that, basically didn't play a game for my school's team. 2 years later, I was a professional rugby player, you know. So there was obviously great external rewards and great internal rewards. So
to not making the team, to being a professional rugby player, what a shit.
Yeah, so,
moving through the gears.
Yeah, and it was just, you know, getting fit, and obviously everything stemmed from just that one decision, and then the actions that, you know, followed it. But you know, so what I did was I just inbuilt a really healthy relationship with, you know, doing something physically difficult, because I had these massive rewards that came from it, internally and externally. And then it's just been a quest from that point to go deeper and deeper into that, because it doesn't give me anything bad, you know. In fact, far from it, it builds me up.
Is there never an end to it, do you reckon? You know, the way, like, I guess we're all humans anyway, and the nature of our life is we're going seeking, where's my next dopamine hit? Where am I going to get my next little buzz of serotonin? How can I reduce this cortisol? Like, we're little, like, it's almost like we're living for our hormones, where the hormones are the bosses, and we're
looking for pleasure and avoiding pain.
You know, that's the nature of the human existence. But is there ever a point where you kind of go, that's enough now? Or does it just then turn into more like sitting with yourself or meditating or finding a version of that with where there's the challenge? Like,
yeah, I think like I can challenge myself, and we all can challenge ourselves with 6 minutes in the gym, like, so the big huge epic adventures or expeditions like the North Atlantic Row are they're important, but they're not like the be all and end all. And
they're
I'm not
more like metaphors for kind of
they're self-expression,
overcoming adversity, your own mental prisons or limits almost.
Yeah, exactly, and constantly looking to expand myself, so like I'd like to my take on doing something like that is that it's the challenge is not rowing the ocean. The challenge is how I row the ocean. So putting myself in situations of extreme stress and difficulty and discomfort and hardship, and then acting the way I want to act, right? Living to the standards I set of myself under that duress, embodying the values that are important to me under that extreme duress. So whenever I finish, if I can manage to finish the expedition, I get an awful lot from the experience if I'm able to live up to those standards and those values under that stress, and it grows me as a person. Literally expands my values and my ability to access them. So so everyday life is a little bit easier, like when you get back off an extreme expedition like that, because I mean, you're not going to get too stressed about too much, like, because of what you've gone through, and like there's a level of self-control and self-reliance that you have, and it's there in the most extreme moment, that no whatever comes your way today, that's grand.
When the aliens come to take over, I'm going hiding under your wing.
Somebody got a bit upset with me when I said not really upset, but it was more along the lines of, I was trying to explain my take on this, and I was like, I'm pretty confident that if the world goes into cataclysmic meltdown, that I'll be one of the last people standing. What? You can't say that. And I was like, that's just my belief. Like, I've been in those places where I know I can rely on myself to get through it because I've practiced it, so.
And I guess those practices have made you such a believer in the process, in the training, in the doing the work, in the discipline, in the daily hardships. Like, have you always been extraordinarily disciplined and being able to take that approach of today, what are the steps I can take today? What do I need to do today? These little steps, independent of your emotions and how you feel, and poor me and victim and look, and I don't have any money and the dog ate my homework, and independent of that, have you always been that kind of, that just steely discipline, or has this been a muscle that you've built consistently over time?
Yeah, more like a muscle and an evolution of those standards, like just, through practice and through self-accountability and pushing to the edges, and then someplace, breaking down or failing in something. Like, I can't articulate enough the positivity in failure, like, so not getting to, maybe a metric in the gym that I'm trying to get to, maybe on the ergometer, that's a place I push myself a lot, because I compete on the indoor rowers, so pushing for something and then not getting there, and then analysing that honestly and holding myself accountable and coming back and putting in place whatever I've learned to make sure I get there the next time, or figuring out where I fell down, or I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. So I think just through that doing of that and that process, I've been able to level up, if you want, my certain values like discipline. But so if you think about, and of course something like professional rugby, like where the pressures, okay, you have your own internal pressures that you put on yourself to achieve, but the external pressures are huge as well, from the environment. So you learn pretty quickly to survive in those environments. Like, you gotta put in some work in certain areas just to be able to survive. So, and you do that, right? So you learn through that experience. So it's kind of I'm a very different person, and I was if you take my rugby career from when I started at 19 to when I finished at 35, an evolution of things like that, like things like discipline, and that just comes through, like I said, the pressures of it all.
Showing up.
Yeah,
And
showing
even
up, yeah.
Even you started Freesbury, which
Yeah.
was something that a good friend of ours, Neil, did it, and Sean did it as well. Dr. Sean.
A few in our group did it, and
Claire?
Claire did it. Yeah, there was a few, and they were all
So Freesbury,
singing
for
their
anyone-
praises and cursing you at the same time.
Freesbury, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like Damian started it, where for the month of February, each day you were going to stay in the cold Irish water for an incremental extra minute. So first, obviously, 1 minute, and the 28th to 28 minutes.
And the irony was when our crowd were doing it, Neil and Claire and Sean were doing it. On the last day, the 28th, I think it was the 28th, was it the 29th? Anyway, it was the last day. There was a whole group of visitors that had come.
They were from the Philippines.
They were from the Philippines or something.
from warmer
they were from
lands in
really warmer,
Ireland.
and they thought this was normal. So they got into the water and they thought, oh, everyone stays in for 20 minutes. And they stayed in for 20 minutes,
Wow.
and an ambulance had to be called because one of them got hypothermic.
Yeah.
So
No.
we'll never forget that, because there
for
was all
sure.
sorts of huff and puff on the beach.
Yeah, that was a challenge just for myself, actually. I was discussing it with a very good friend of mine, Johnny O'Connor, and we were like, the discussion was, is it possible? Like, do you think it's possible to stay in the water? So I was like, I put it off for a while, but then I think it's going into its 5th year now, so that was 2018 maybe. I said I'd try it. I was trying it. He bottled it, but the 2 days before I had committed to it, I threw it out on my social media, and like 13 or 14 people said they were going to try it as well that year, and now there's pockets of it everywhere. Like, it's far outgrown me. Like, which is great to see people use it now to raise a lot of money for charity. And I just, the benefits of the cold. Where do you start? The benefits of cold water immersion, particularly the ocean, I think above anything else, is just something
It's the
special
epitome
about
of what
it.
we talked about, consistently facing the obstacle and doing the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, because you flex that. You have to flex that muscle on a daily
That's right.
basis if you are a daily swimmer.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some mornings you're not going to want to get in.
Some mornings, most mornings. Try 364 to 365.
Fair play. Well, you're just in that in itself. Jesus, you're putting in some practice of, facing into things and approaching stuff that's uncomfortable.
Well, I think the easy thing, and that's why if there's no decision, if you just always get in, there's no decision, there's no, you've immediately taken away with the decision of, will I get in that's even worse.
Yeah.
If you just know you get in, it's not like and it's a bit like if you don't have a plan B, like it's just, well, we just have to keep going through these failures until we get to that A at the end.
Did you see a whale on your boat?
Yeah,
What sort of wildlife would you see, and would it frighten you?
So,
because you're there on your own, in your little...
Mostly dolphins. So I had about literally 50 days straight of pods of dolphins coming by the boat on some level. To the extent,
Would they be chatting away to you?
Yeah. Sometimes, they're all they all have their own personality. Mostly, it's a joyous personality, I'd like to think. But some days they just come and they're gone. Then again, curious, obviously, creatures. The whale sightings significantly more on this one than I did on the last ocean row. So there was mostly the pilot whales, and then there
what
was...
are they like? These huge...
No, they're smaller whales. They're not much bigger. They're if you imagine 3 dolphins kind of sellotaped together, that'd be a pilot whale. But we had 2 big sperm whales one day. They're huge.
What a name, a sperm whale.
I know, right? I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. I had to ask somebody.
How big are they?
Jesus, they're huge. They must have been about 20 meters or so.
They make your boat look tiny.
They were a little bit away, thankfully. But yeah, they would have. And then there was plenty of days, but there was one whale experience that I'll never forget, because we saw whales quite a lot, but it's me in the boat now. I talk about us as we, but
me and Damian.
Yeah, but there was one day where I heard I love it's one of the joys of doing something like that is the experience with the wildlife. So I'm when I have an opportunity, I'm on it like a shot. So I heard a whale, the noise of it breathing, breaching and breathing to my right. It was probably about 30 meters away, and I saw its head come up and then its dorsal fin, and I kind of expected it to just finish there, and then the back just kept coming and coming and coming and coming. I was like, holy, look at the size of this. It was a proper, what you imagine a whale to be like. It was just ginormous, and I mean, I'm not even sure the kind of melange of emotions that brings up. Like, it's like joy, it's like gratitude, it's like excitement, it's like, you know, it's just incredible experience to
And
have
fear,
such a
does fear
connection.
come up as a...
Not really. Like, one of the things I wanted to do on this crossing was swim with the whales. So, not that I can swim, but get into the water when the whales and the dolphins are around. So the first few days when we came across pods of whales, like, I was putting on my harness and jumping in the water, hoping that they'd come really close, like, you know, because I just thought, like, what an opportunity to have.
Did they?
No,
interesting.
no chance. And the one day I nearly got close to that, there was these kind of two super schools of dolphins, or maybe it was the same school, I'm not sure, but they were around the boat, and by the time I got myself ready, because I have to, like, firstly strip off all my clothes, then put a climbing harness on, and then clip in into the boat, and had to get rid of oars to jump in properly so I wouldn't tangle the line. So there's a bit to it. By the time I got in, they were gone. So I stayed in there for about 20 minutes waiting, and then hoping they'd come back. So I was, they're gone for the day. So I got out, and then they came back just as I'd, like, dried myself, you know. So that was as close as I got. But otherwise, I mean, bird life every day, but sea turtles was another one. Saw quite a bit. And a sunfish.
Oh, they're the huge looking things.
Big ugly looking
Amazing.
thing. Yeah. Had one of them one day right beside trying to eat what do they call them?
Oh, those things in the
The
bottom
things
of the
on the
boat.
bottom of the boat, trying to eat those off. Yeah, didn't eat enough of them.
And then just another one.
Can I ask-
Barnacles.
I want to ask, like, my inner 5-year-old going, Damien, you tell me a story about a storm.
Oh
A
yeah,
big storm. Go on, tell me a story. I'm just excited. I feel like my little son. But Damien, tell me a story.
day 24, the biggest storm I've ever gone through.
Day 24.
175 days I've spent on the ocean, and this was by far the most scary, kind of fearful, dreadful. Like, I literally could feel the dread. So basically, I capsized 3 times in this storm while on power anchor, which is not meant to happen. So that just shows you the ferocity of it. 10, 12 meter waves gusting at
10, 12, so waves that are like 3 times the size of your boat.
Yeah,
The length of your
3
boat.
times the size of a not 3 times. Yeah, 3 times the size of a 2-story building, maybe.
So 6 stories.
Yeah, crazy, like just walls of water.
And just crashing down on you. And
Gusting. Well, the boat does. The boat will ride up the face and then over the top, you know. But what happens was, if it gets on, so what was happening was on power anchor, I didn't have enough ballast in the boat, which is weight basically underneath the waterline, which would keep it as steady as it can be kept in those conditions on the power anchor, which is a parachute that sits out the front of the boat, holds about on 90 meters of line, holds about 2 tons of water in it. So the boat was kind of sloshing on this power anchor, and the odd time when I'd surf up the face of a wave, if it had sloshed enough to one side, the break of the wave would just hit the side of the boat, and that's what was capsizing me and turning
and
me
you get
over.
soaked. And
Yeah, well, I was inside the cabin, so I just imagine been in a kind of washing machine doing a like one.
does
kind
water
of,
come in? Or
some water came in, yeah. Now that's not meant to happen, and it was a mistake on my part. There's an air vent on the cabin hatch, the big cabin hatch, and to lock it you have to turn it like 1/4 of a turn to the left, and it kind of it's a flimsy enough thing now, in fairness, and I thought I had it locked, but I hadn't had it locked. So it's basically like somebody throwing a bucket of water on you while you were kind of going over 360 degrees inside. That's what it felt like. And it induced some panic, because water's not meant to get in, and now all of a sudden I had like basically a bucket of water thrown on top of me, and all my electrics are in there, and like the seawater just destroys everything, you know. So I'm always thinking about the threats to the expedition and succeeding in what I want to do, and that was a huge one. Like, so the first 2 capsizes got like the water in, and then I figured out finally that it was the the little air vent that was letting it in, so I was able to close it for the next one. But like
just sit there in your own farts.
Your own
exactly.
misery. But that was forecast 20 hours, that storm, and it was just downgraded from a tropical storm, which is like a hurricane in North American standards. So that shows you the kind of strength of what I was going through. And I capsized 5 times in the first 3 times in the first 5 hours. So then I had another 15 hours. I knew that it was ending at whatever 3 o'clock the next day, roughly.
And you have the para anchor out the full time, and you just have to sit there for 20 hours.
Yeah, but you're just waiting, like you're just lying down, waiting for the next capsize, like because you're pretty sure it's coming in those conditions, right? It didn't come, but the anticipation of it is so draining and so dreadful, like literally, you know, because
and there's no sleeping probably.
No, you can try, and I mean, if you're, I mean, to a certain extent, if you're stressed enough, like you actually will fall asleep. But I didn't during that one. There was no fall. I was just during that storm in particular. There was no falling asleep. I was just listening, because the different waves make different noises, and you know the sound of the one that is a possible capsize. It's like this, it breaks just at a certain point and then it hisses along, and I'm just I'm just sitting there, and every time I hear a hiss, I put out my 2 hands and 2 legs onto the cabin sides and just wait for that capsize. So 15 hours of that, like just,
And is it true that, like, you know, the calm after the storm, like, is it literally that then it just goes?
Yeah. But I had another storm 24 hours later. So I knew this was coming. I knew I had 2 storms. So 20 hours of a storm, roughly 18 hours calm, and then another storm. Now, thankfully, the second one wasn't as strong and powerful as the first one. Like the first one, so 3 capsizes, ripped 2 oars off the boat out of their holdings, ripped the compass. I lost like basically everything that was on deck. That's when I lost my water boiler. I lost my 10-litre drinking container. It bent 2 aerials, basically 60 degrees to the boat. It broke a deck repeater screen as well. So like it decimated the boat. Like there was a time. So when the first capsize came and went, the whole cabin was wet, and I went through the whole process of cleaning it and trying to get everything dry and making sure, you know, nothing was gone. And I knew on the far side, on the other side, there's a small little cabin for storage. On the other side, I knew that there was dry towels in there, but if you're to go on deck, and every time you go outside the cabin, you need to be clipped into the boat. And one of the kind of mistakes I made was I left my climbing harness on a line. So at that point, the climbing harness had kind of jimmied down that line to the other side of the boat. So if I was to go out, I wouldn't have my climbing harness on, and then I'm really susceptible to be thrown off the boat. And if you're thrown off the boat, that's it, right? So I was like, it's only dry towels. You can put up with the wet for 20 hours or whatever it was at that point, 18 hours. So I didn't go out. The next capsize was the one that ripped off the oars. So one went on the first capsize, So I had 6 oars starting. The first one went on the first capsize. And then on the second capsize, when I kind of had sorted the cabin out, I looked outside the hatch, and I could see 2 oars in, like, still attached to the boat, but the blade was in the water. So it was only 1 point of contact with the boat. And I was like, if I lose them now, I'm like down to 2 oars, and the chance of me getting across with just 2 oars is really, really slim. So I had to leave the cabin without putting on the climbing harness. So it was like a case of, I have to save those oars, but the climbing harness is on the other side of the boat. So I had to just, I'm stark as naked, get out that cabin hatch as quick as possible, and then try and have 4 points of contact as much as I can to get to the other end. Now it's only 2 meters, but still the risk is there, right?
And you're in a storm, like.
And I'm in the storm, the big 12 meter waves, yeah. So I flew across the cabin, hanging on to the 2 lines and making sure, obviously, my feet are, you know, as much as I can to walk or crawl or run across a deck attached to the
it
ground.
daytime or night?
It's daytime, yeah. And then grab the climbing harness, put it on really quickly, clip in twice into the boat. So now I've got like 5 or 6 points of contact, so I'm pretty safe even if the boat goes over. And then I get in this wrestle with the oars, and I was able to save one of them, but I lost the other one, unfortunately. So at that point I was down to 4 oars, I think it was. I ended up, a few months later, but only 2. Yeah.
A few months later.
Yeah.
It's gas. It really, really is. Okay, final thing I wanted to talk to you about is really about spirituality, and I suppose it's touched on throughout it, because there is a real depth to you. There is. It's like sitting with an old oak tree talking to you, and I mean that in the loveliest sense. And I'm thinking more of the tree metaphor, that we're all, we all look outside of ourselves all day long. But a bit like a tree, you look at a big tree and there's even more going on underneath the surface. Like there's just as many roots and just as many depth to it as there is of the fruits. And I just wondered, in terms of, like, is spirituality for you, is it that meeting yourself, during these incredible, challenging, arduous tasks? Or what is spirituality, and now being a father and having to move now to Australia and all these type of things, like what does spirituality mean to you, and how do you practice it, or where does that deeper sense of meaning within life come from?
Do you know what? I'm not sure. The honest answer is, it's a word I struggle to associate anything with, like if that makes sense. Like, so, it's always been a bit of a, maybe I've just bad associations with the word, or poor associations, but my deeper sense of purpose comes from exploring life. That's where I've always got these amazing kind of experiences internally, and that journey for me is like the most important journey. People, I mean, if you were to press me on what's my picture of success, I'd be saying somebody has a very, very healthy relationship with themselves, with all sides of themselves, the good side and the bad side, the dark side and the light side, because that's what we're all made up of, right? So yeah, it's so through that exploration, I've really uncovered things within myself that are very enriching, and I've gained a lot of worth and a lot of belief within myself through exposing myself to things like we chatted about, things that are difficult or things that are challenging for me. It's not always through a physical prism, even though that's where the basis of how I've learned to do this is. But, I found in the last few years I've expanded that much more outside of, the physical prism of life, and just challenging myself to be better on all levels, in the roles I inhabit in my life, to be a better partner and a better relationship with myself, and a better father and a better son and a better brother and a better member of the community. So yeah, it's just that constant challenge just has kind of lit up my life and my internal world in particular, and I suppose that might be for me at least, that might be what the spiritual journey.
Yeah, I think maybe it's the internal world and your own relationship with yourself. I think that's probably how I would define it more.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that about the roots thing, or use the tree as an analogy. So I have a podcast that I do just on expeditions, where I try and relay what I'm going through and how I'm getting through it, because of it's really a kind of way to break down, if you want, the extremes of what I do, and to just show people an insight into that making that connection between genuinely challenging yourself through something that's important and what that gives you, and that the kind of journey of growth between those two things. So I called it Deep Roots because of it. That for me, the analogy of the tree deepening itself into the ground. So it comes from a Tolkien quote, the old that are strong do not wither, deep roots are not touched by the frost. So you imagine the frost of life.
I like that.
Yeah. the frost of life can't get to those deep roots because you're constantly trying to deepen yourself. You know?
But it's a bit like the internal. If you're
deeper than the vicissitudes of life.
If you have a core, you know, if you've got a core sense of self, which is, you know, you've really got those things that, you know, the way you say if the world around you's dying, you know, you've got depths to you which you've spent time in, that, you know, no matter what kind of external pressures or winds or storms come at you, you can recede into that place and go, well, here we go. I'm going to tap into that greater power.
Right. Yeah. And there's beautiful, like, that's a beautiful journey of like security, you know, because of how you feel about yourself. And I think if you practice that way of life, you know, and continually to expose yourself to areas of discomfort for yourself, I think, you know, you're over time, you're getting into that level of like mastering yourself, you know, self-mastery, like, you know, and I think that's a good thing to do with your life.
Yeah, great. And is fatherhood next? Is that what the next ultimate adventure is?
It's definitely an adventure, yeah. And I mean, it's a challenge. I'm enjoying it, but it's definitely more challenging than I thought it would be. Or, you know, you see people all the time, you know, becoming parents, and kind of the inside, the look from the outside in is like, that's grand, sure, everyone's doing that, like, but then when you're in the middle of it, you're like, geez, this is actually, you know, this is a serious challenge, you know. But I love the role, and although like my daughter's only 21 months old, and a huge, like, the mother is obviously, you know, she's the caregiver at that point. I am hugely excited about kind of taking more of that responsibility as things go on, and playing a strong, influential role in guiding them in life. You know, I think that's something I'm very excited about.
Yeah, I think fatherhood is definitely the greatest joy I've ever experienced, greatest love I've ever experienced, and the greatest challenge, and the greatest cost, like of need required. But that's like anything in life, anything that's harder, the reward equals the challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Typically.
The reward is in direct proportion to the challenge.
Yeah.
That's probably a bit like the tree, down and up. You can have shallow roots, you have a shallow tree.
Yang, light and dark.
Yeah. So beautiful, it's been glorious.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with you.
Great conversation.
I really admire what you're doing and you as a human. Congrats.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the pursuit of self-mastery and the looking into discomfort, I think, is such a glorious thing to be doing.
Yeah, I like it.
yeah, it's a good
one. It's taken me a while, like, to find my way. Like, even when I was in rugby, I was hungry. Like, rugby was so important to me, but I was still hungry to get out of that kind of constrictive bubble, you know. So the last kind of 6 or 7 years have been incredibly enriching, and just fed me more to continue living this way.
Brilliant. And you do lots of talks to businesses or teams, and you do loads of different things now.
Yeah. You know, speak about challenging ourselves. If you'd asked me 4 or 5 years ago, do you think you'll ever like be giving talks? I would have said not in a million years. But yeah, it's really grown on me, I suppose, and that was another area I felt I could challenge myself in, and I continue to do that because it's challenging to stand up in front of a room and try and stay authentic to yourself and get a message across and make an impact on somebody. But so I doing plenty of that now since I got off the boat as well.
Brilliant.
Well done.
Yeah, well done.
Nice. And people follow you on Instagram, Old Stock.
Yeah, that's the one.
And anything else? Anywhere else?
Are you going to write a book?
I'm hopefully, yeah. Like I should be started by now, but I'm kind of a book is in the works. Yeah, I hope to have something written within the next 12 months. And if you want to hear about my Everest expedition and my 2 Atlantic rows, Deep Roots is a great place to.
Deep Roots. That's the
podcast. Yeah, delve in there and you'll get a very raw and real insight into what it's like to row an ocean. It's kind of like a daily dispatch from those places, you know. So it's raw. It is raw, yeah. Particularly on the harder days.
Yeah, I can imagine. Brilliant. Well, thanks again, Damian.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Fair play to you.
Thanks to everyone who joined. What a really, really inspiring, humble gentleman. Really, a
like
man of great value.
It's not what you think when you think of an explorer, someone that's played 15 years of professional rugby. You think of this kind of male, masculine archetype, but he's more the gentleman, like the evolved aspect of masculinity, like this soft, considered. There's a gentleness, like someone that has put themselves through the gauntlet of life and has come out the other end softer, gentler, kinder, more connected to themselves.
Yeah, I really hope you got something from that. Certainly, it reminded me of the importance of hardship, the importance of, the lessons that we learn when embracing discomfort. And I certainly, spending time in Damian's presence there is a real ease and there is a contentment, which is really, really nice. As he kind of describes it, there's an element that forces you to you have to master yourself and dealing with these emotions, and it builds inner resilience and resolve, which I just admire hugely.
Nice reminder, that quote. It's only through trials that does treasure come from.
Oh, beautiful.
That's a nice one.
I hope you really enjoyed that. Damian is old stock on Instagram if you feel like following him.
He is currently writing a book and he does lots of public speaking talk. So if you feel like you need an inspiring talker, he is phenomenally inspiring.
Yeah, really, really good. So thanks for your attention. We really, really appreciate it. We know you could be doing loads of other things this time, and we're most grateful that you joined us. And
wishing you a good day ahead.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Anyway, excuse that.
Thanks a million.
Bye.
I'll see you. Bye. 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 Bye.